There's gonna be spoiler footage in this, just so you know. So I just had the chance to replay Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade, also known as Fire Emblem 7 or just Fire Emblem from the Game Boy Advance. The reason it has so many names is because it was the first Fire Emblem that was localized in the West. I've played this game a long time ago. I've maybe done 1 or 2 runs over the last 20 years, but I just felt like now it's like 2 decades old and maybe I would just give it a go. This game is one of my favorite in the series. It's the first game that ever came out here, and at the time, I felt like it was something so fresh and different for the Game Boy Advance. So the game has 3 main lords, and it starts you out with Lynn, who serves as the tutorial character. Though the tutorial parts can feel a little overdone and a little hand-holdy, it does feel cool to have a little mini campaign that gives you a taste of the full experience. One main takeaway I had was how great it is at onboarding new players. You get 1 or 2 of all the main units that you'll have throughout the campaign, and you get to learn what they're good at, and the mechanics of Fire Emblem. And by chapter 10 of Lynn's story, you'll probably know if you like the series or not. Not a lot of challenge, but it's enough to keep you motivated. I really liked how in Lynn's story the characters felt a lot more personable. That's something that I do think gets lost in Eliwood and Hector's main stories, since those resemble more of the original Fire Emblem formula. You just get to spend a lot more time with the characters in Lynn's story, which reminds me a lot of the newer games. I really think it makes Blazing Blade the most accessible retro Fire Emblem, retro being anything pre-Awakening. In my mind, old school Fire Emblem stopped at about Awakening. Games after Awakening have a very different look and feel to the original era, and I think the original Western era is almost its own section. So you'd have the old school, the original Western era, and then the post-Awakening era.
Fire Emblem 烈火の剣
I think the full campaign, being Eliwood or Hector's stories, are really fun. It really goes to show that the Fire Emblem formula at this point had already been reined in to feel just as good as the new games. New titles like Three Houses and Engage really just serve as layers applied to a really perfect foundation that was set out years ago. And it's no surprise that the fans demand remakes for this and some of the other popular games. I think for a Game Boy Advance game, the animations are still really fun to look at, especially for certain crit animations. I think after you adjust the walking speed of the units, the gameplay feels pretty fast still too, despite not being able to skip enemy turns or combat like in the new games. The music is also really great in this one, despite the Game Boy Advance's pretty rough reputation for sound fonts. I think Eliwood and Lynn's themes are real standouts. Have a listen. Seeing as Blazing Blade was the first game released overseas, it's widely considered one of the favorites by fans, and I think because of that, it's one of the most ported games in the series, and it's been on almost every Nintendo console that has Game Boy Advance support. So it's really easy to get a hold of these days compared to a lot of the other games of the era, like Binding Blade or Path of Radiance. Blazing Blade has a lot to make new and old fans really happy, with a lot of likable characters, a great cast, and some really solid maps. The mission variety is pretty good. The gameplay can seem a little simple if you're more familiar with the new games in the series, but the core Fire Emblem experience is still as strong as always. I was a bit surprised how much I was really enjoying myself, despite not having any of the bells and whistles that you get in something like Fire Emblem Engage. For some long-running series, I think it can be hard to go back to a game that's over 2 decades old, but Blazing Blade still feels very fresh. The writing is still pretty charming. I was pretty invested in the story and dialogue, and I was kind of filling the voice lines out in my head with the cast from Heroes and Engage. Although the plot does feel empty at points because you don't have Roy's game, The Binding Blade, since that one came out exclusively in Japan. I'm probably going to go back and play Binding Blade now on a translation patch. I've never played that one before, so I think it could be fun. Although I've heard it's not as tightly designed as Blazing Blade. During my playthrough, all I could think of was how simple it would be to bring this game up to the modern standards. All you'd have to do is really add voice acting and a new graphic system, and it would be just as fun as a lot of Fire Emblem games are now. It has one of my favorite art styles in the series. I wish it was something between this and the art style in Echoes would be perfect for me. By 2003, Fire Emblem's formula was already so refined. I love the way that Fire Emblem lets you almost tell a story by picking certain units and having them become your star player, or maybe a certain unit that you like is really struggling and not getting any good stat upgrades, so you have to drop them or decide what you want to do with them. Okay, so like weird thing, I looked at the character tier list after this game, and Hector was considered one of the best units in the game. I don't know if it's just because I played Ellawood's story on normal mode or whatever, but my Hector was terrible. He had no speed, no strength, and he would just die all over the place. He was one of my worst units, and I had to use him in every chapter.
No man can be trusted.
What happened to Dorcas?
I put poison in his mutton.
Build an army. Trust nobody. Fire Emblem. Only on Game Boy Advance. Rated everyone.
So, is Fire Emblem Blazing Blade worth playing today? Yeah, probably. I would definitely check it out if you're a fan of the newer games. It's very accessible, even if you're very used to the quality of life's features in the later games. Once you get used to things like the menus and the small changes to the way combat works, I think you'd be right on board. And for old fans returning to the game, it's still just as fun as you remember. If you're an older fan like me, then you'll probably slide right back in, like I did. And if you're a newbie looking for something more, I think you'll find a streamlined and fun experience with some small changes to get used to. So anyways, go check it out. And if you made it this far, leave a comment below telling me what your favorite unit is in Blazing Blade.